The lunch rush at Sapphire had finally died down, and Jessica Chen rolled her neck from side to side, trying to work out the knots that had formed during the past 3 hours. The restaurant hummed with the gentle clinking of silverware and the soft murmur of conversation, a welcome change from the controlled chaos of noon. Jessica glanced at her watch, 2:37 p.m., less than 5 hours until her shift ended. "Table 7 needs water," called Raj, one of the other waiters, as he hurried past with a tray of desserts balanced on one hand. Jessica nodded, filling a crystal pitcher with ice water and lemon slices. After nearly 3 years at Sapphire, Chicago's upscale dining hotspot, she moved through the restaurant with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of the place. From the spotless marble floors to the crystal chandeliers that cast a warm glow over the dining area, Sapphire was the kind of restaurant where people came to celebrate life's big moments, or to show off how much money they could spend on a single meal. "How's your section doing?" asked Li Wei, the host, as Jessica passed the front desk. "Fine now. That couple who complained about their steak being overcooked finally left," Jessica replied, not breaking her stride. "Left me a 10% tip after I got the chef to remake their meal twice." Li Wei winced. "Sorry about that. Not your fault. Some people just come in looking for something to complain about," Jessica said with a shrug. It was part of the job, especially at a place like Sapphire, where the prices on the menu gave customers the idea that perfection wasn't just expected, it was guaranteed. The afternoon crowd at Sapphire was typically lighter than the evening rush, mostly business people having late lunches or tourists who had managed to snag a reservation. Jessica preferred these hours. She could give better service when she wasn't running between 8 tables at once, and better service usually meant better tips. Jessica had just finished refilling water glasses at table 7 when she heard Li Wei's voice rise slightly at the front desk. That was unusual. Li Wei prided himself on maintaining the same pleasant, slightly deferential tone with every guest who walked through the door. "Of course, sir." "Right this way," Li Wei was saying, but Jessica caught the slight tightness in his voice. She looked up to see Li Wei leading a family of 4 toward her section. The family stood out immediately, though Jessica couldn't put her finger on exactly why. The man was tall with broad shoulders, wearing dark jeans that probably cost more than Jessica's rent, and a simple black polo shirt. The woman beside him had her hair pulled back in a neat bun and wore a flowing blouse over slim-fitting pants. Behind them were 2 teenagers, a boy and a girl, both absorbed in their phones. They were well-dressed, but in a subtle way that spoke of comfort rather than showing off. And they were black, which wasn't particularly unusual at Sapphire, but still a minority among their usual clientele. What caught Jessica's attention was how Li Wei was acting. His usual smooth confidence had been replaced by something that looked almost like nervousness. He pulled out the chair for the woman with slightly too much flourish and nearly knocked over the water glass. "Your server will be with you shortly," Li Wei said, his voice a touch higher than normal. Then he practically scurried back to his post at the front. Jessica raised an eyebrow. Li Wei wasn't usually so jumpy around guests, no matter how wealthy or important they might be. She made a mental note to ask him about it later as she picked up her notepad and headed over to the table. "Good afternoon. Welcome to Sapphire," Jessica said, placing menus in front of each person. "My name is Jessica, and I'll be taking care of you today. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The man looked up at her with a warm smile. "Yes, thank you. I'd like sparkling water, please." "The same for me," the woman said. Returning Jessica's smile, the teenage boy, without looking up from his phone, mumbled, "Coke." The girl elbowed her brother. "Don't be rude, Andre." The boy, Andre, finally looked up. "Sorry, may I please have a Coke?" "And for you?" Jessica asked the girl. "Lemonade, please. If you make it here?" "We do," Jessica confirmed. "I'll be right back with those drinks while you look over the menu." As Jessica walked away, she heard the family's conversation pick up behind her. The man's deep laugh carried across the restaurant, causing a few heads to turn from nearby tables. The teenagers were arguing about something on one of their phones, their voices rising slightly. Raj appeared at her side as she punched the drink order into the computer. "New table?" "Yeah, family of 4. They seem lively," Raj said, glancing over at the table where the girl was now showing something on her phone to her parents, all of them laughing. Jessica shrugged. "It's pretty empty in here right now. They're not bothering anyone." By the time Jessica returned with the drinks, the family had settled down somewhat. She placed each beverage in front of its owner and took out her notepad. "Are you ready to order, or do you need a few more minutes?" "I think we're ready," the man said, closing his menu. "I'll have the grilled salmon with the seasonal vegetables." The woman nodded. "The same for me, but with the wild rice instead of the potatoes, please." Andre ordered a burger, the most expensive one on the menu, and his sister chose the pasta special. Jessica collected the menus and headed to the kitchen to place their order. As the afternoon wore on, the restaurant began to fill up for the early dinner service. The buzz of conversation grew louder, and Jessica found herself moving faster between tables. She noticed that the family in her section was still having an animated conversation. The teenagers were showing their parents something on their phones, and all four were laughing loudly. Mr. Peterson, a regular who came in every Friday for a pre-theater dinner and always requested Jessica's section, caught her eye as she passed his table. He gave a pointed look toward the family and frowned slightly. Jessica nodded in acknowledgement and continued to the kitchen to check on orders. When she returned to the dining room, Mrs. Winters, another regular seated near the family, stopped her with a light touch on the arm. "Jessica, dear," Mrs. Winters said in a stage whisper, "is there something you can do about that?" She tilted her head toward the family, who were still engrossed in their lively conversation. "I'll speak to them," Jessica assured her with a professional smile. This wasn't the first time Jessica had to ask guests to keep their voices down. Sapphire had an unwritten rule about maintaining a certain atmosphere, one that allowed conversation without disrupting other diners' experiences. Usually, a gentle reminder was all it took. Jessica approached the family's table, where the teenagers were now showing their father something on a tablet, all of them leaning in and talking over each other. "Excuse me," Jessica said, keeping her voice pleasant but firm. "I hope you're enjoying your meal. I just wanted to ask if you could lower your voices a bit. We have some other guests who are finding it difficult to have their own conversations." The table fell silent. The woman looked surprised while the man's expression was unreadable. The teenagers exchanged glances. "I'm sorry," the woman said after a moment. "We didn't realize we were being disruptive." "It's not a problem," Jessica assured them. "It happens sometimes when people are having a good time." She was about to walk away when she noticed Mr. Peterson giving her another pointed look. He raised his eyebrows and glanced at the teenager's casual clothes, then back at Jessica. She got the message. Sapphire didn't have an official dress code, but there was an understanding among the staff that certain standards were expected. The teenagers weren't dressed inappropriately. The boy was wearing a clean, plain t-shirt and jeans, and the girl had on a simple sweater, but they were decidedly casual compared to the other diners in their business attire and evening wear. Jessica hesitated. The restaurant wasn't even at capacity yet, and the family wasn't breaking any actual rules. But she also knew that keeping the regular customers happy was a priority. Mr. Peterson came in every week and always tipped 20%. Mrs. Winters was on the board of a charity that held its annual gala at Sapphire. "Is there something else?" the man asked, noticing her hesitation. Jessica made a split-second decision that would change the course of her entire career. "Actually, sir," she said, lowering her voice, "Sapphire does try to maintain certain atmosphere standards. We don't have a strict dress code, but our guests typically dress more formally for dinner service." The man looked at his children, then back at Jessica. His expression remained neutral, but something flashed in his eyes that Jessica couldn't quite read. "I see," he said simply. What Jessica didn't see was Li Wei at the host stand, now frantically trying to catch her attention, making small cutting motions with his hand across his throat. She also didn't notice the restaurant manager, Thomas, emerging from his office with a panicked expression as he spotted the family in Jessica's section. And Jessica certainly had no idea that the quiet, understated family she was subtly asking to respect the restaurant's standards had, 6 months ago, signed the papers making them the new owners of not just Sapphire, but the entire chain of upscale restaurants it belonged to. All she knew was that she had a section full of regulars to keep happy and standards to maintain, standards that were about to be turned completely upside down. The silence at the table stretched uncomfortably. Jessica felt a prickle of doubt but pushed it aside. She was just doing her job, making sure all the guests had a pleasant experience. Perhaps we should go somewhere else, the woman suggested, her voice calm but with an edge that hadn't been there before. She placed her napkin beside her half-eaten meal. No, Diana, we're already eating, the man replied. He turned to Jessica with a measured look. I'm curious, is there a written dress code for this restaurant? Jessica shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Not officially written, no, but we do have certain expectations for dinner service. And who decides these expectations? He asked, his tone genuinely curious rather than confrontational. Before Jessica could answer, she felt a presence beside her. Thomas, the restaurant manager, had appeared as if from thin air, his face flushed and his smile strained. Is everything all right here? Thomas asked, his eyes darting between Jessica and the family. We were just discussing the restaurant's dress code, the man explained. Your server was explaining that our children aren't dressed appropriately for dinner. Thomas's smile froze. I'm so sorry for any misunderstanding. There's absolutely no issue with anyone's attire. Jessica, could I speak with you for a moment? He gestured toward the back of the restaurant. Actually, the woman, Diana, said, rising from her seat, I think we've lost our appetite. Kids, let's go. The teenagers looked confused but stood up. The girl glanced at Jessica with an expression that wasn't angry, just disappointed, which somehow felt worse. Please, there's no need to leave, Thomas said, his voice rising slightly in panic. Your meal is on the house. We'd be happy to. The man held up a hand, stopping Thomas mid-sentence. That won't be necessary. We'll pay for what we've eaten. He pulled out his wallet and placed several large bills on the table, far more than the cost of their meal. Keep the change, he said to Jessica, his eyes meeting hers with an unreadable expression. As the family gathered their belongings, Li Wei hovered nearby, looking like he might be sick. Mr. Peterson and Mrs. Winters watched with undisguised interest, clearly enjoying the drama unfolding before them. The man pulled out his phone as they walked toward the exit. I need to call Robert, Jessica heard him say to his wife. This changes the timeline. As soon as the family disappeared through the front doors, Thomas turned to Jessica, his face a storm cloud. My office now. Jessica followed him, confusion swirling through her mind. She'd never seen Thomas react this way to guests leaving even when they were unhappy. And who was Robert? What timeline? Li Wei caught up with her as she followed Thomas to the back office. Do you have any idea who that was? He hissed, his eyes wide. No, Jessica said, feeling a knot of dread begin to form in her stomach. Who? Li Wei opened his mouth to answer, but Thomas cut him off. Back to your post, Li Wei. I need to speak with Jessica alone. The manager's office was small, with barely enough room for a desk and 2 chairs. Thomas closed the door behind them and took a deep breath before sitting down. Jessica remained standing, her heart pounding in her chest. Sit down, Jessica, Thomas said, his voice eerily calm. She sat, gripping the arms of the chair. What's going on? Who were they? Thomas stared at her for a long moment. That was James and Diana Marshall. The names hung in the air between them. Jessica waited for more, but Thomas seemed to expect some reaction. I'm sorry, I don't know who that is, she finally admitted. Thomas laughed, a short, humorless sound. Of course you don't. Why would you bother to know who signs your paychecks? The knot in Jessica's stomach tightened. What do you mean? James Marshall is the CEO of Meridian Hospitality Group. Diana Marshall is the COO. 6 months ago, they acquired Sapphire along with 5 other restaurants in our chain. Thomas leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. You just asked the owners of this restaurant to leave because their children weren't dressed fancy enough. The room seemed to tilt. But no one told us the ownership had changed, Jessica stammered. It wasn't announced to the staff because nothing was supposed to change day to day. The Marshalls like to visit their properties unannounced to get an authentic experience. Thomas rubbed his temples. They specifically asked not to receive special treatment, but that didn't mean treat them worse than other customers. Jessica felt sick. I didn't know. Mr. Peterson and Mrs. Winters were complaining about the noise and then about how the kids were dressed. And I just thought, you thought you'd enforce an unwritten rule more strictly on them than on the white family at table 12, whose son is wearing nearly the same outfit? Thomas's voice was razor sharp. Jessica flinched. She hadn't even noticed the boy at table 12, and the realization made her stomach drop further. Had she really singled out the Marshall family because they were black? She wanted to deny it, to explain that it wasn't about race at all, but the words caught in her throat as she replayed the scene in her mind. I wasn't thinking about, she began, but couldn't finish the sentence. Thomas sighed heavily. Look, I know you're not a bad person, Jessica. You're one of our best servers. But what happened out there? He shook his head. That was textbook unconscious bias. You applied a standard to one family that you didn't even notice was being broken by another. Jessica felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. I'm so sorry. I never meant to. Intention doesn't matter much when it comes to the impact, Thomas interrupted. The fact is you made the owners of this restaurant feel unwelcome because of assumptions you made about them. What's going to happen now? Jessica asked, her voice small. Thomas leaned back in his chair. I honestly don't know. Mr. Marshall was on the phone with Robert Chen, the VP of Operations. That can't be good. Am I fired? The question hung in the air between them. Not by me, at least not today, Thomas said after a moment. But I can't promise what will happen once this gets up the chain. Jessica nodded numbly. She'd worked at Sapphire for 3 years. She'd been saving up for graduate school, counting on the generous tips from wealthy patrons. And now, because of one thoughtless moment, it might all be gone. Go home, Jessica, Thomas said, his voice softer now. Take the rest of the day off. I'll cover your section. We'll figure this out tomorrow. Jessica stood on shaky legs. I really am sorry, Thomas. I know you are. He looked tired suddenly, older than his 40-something years. Just take some time to think about what happened today. Really think about it. Jessica nodded and left the office. The restaurant seemed different now. The elegant space that had felt like a second home suddenly foreign and unwelcoming. Raj caught her eye from across the dining room, raising his eyebrows in a silent question. She shook her head slightly and continued toward the staff room to collect her things. Li Wei was waiting by the back door, smoking a cigarette, something he only did when severely stressed. So you know now? He asked as she approached. Yes. Jessica leaned against the wall beside him.
Why didn't you warn me?
I tried. Li Wei threw his hands up. Didn't you see me trying to get your attention? I nearly gave myself a hernia making the cut-it-out sign at you. I didn't notice, Jessica admitted. I was too focused on keeping Mr. Peterson and Mrs. Winters happy. Li Wei snorted. Yeah, because God forbid the rich white regulars have to hear a black family enjoying their meal. The words hit Jessica like a slap. That's not fair. It wasn't about race. They were being loud and the kids weren't dressed for— Oh, come on, Jess, Li Wei cut her off. I've seen you let plenty of loud customers slide. Remember that bachelor party last month? They were way louder than the Marshalls, but you just laughed it off. Jessica opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. He was right. She had a different standard for different guests, and she'd never really examined why. I messed up, she whispered. Yeah, you did. Li Wei's voice was gentler now. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Jessica pushed away from the wall. I don't know if there's anything I can do. Thomas sent me home for the day. I might not even have a job tomorrow. Li Wei took one last drag of his cigarette before stubbing it out. For what it's worth, I don't think the Marshalls are the type to fire someone without hearing their side. They've got a reputation for being fair. You knew who they were as soon as they walked in, didn't you? Jessica asked. I recognized them from the press release photos when the acquisition was announced, Li Wei confirmed. Diana Marshall has been on the cover of Business Weekly twice this year. They're pretty well known in the hospitality world. Jessica felt another wave of shame wash over her. She hadn't recognized them because she hadn't bothered to learn about the company she worked for. She'd been so focused on her own goals, saving for grad school, moving up to a management position, that she'd paid no attention to the bigger picture. I should go, she said, pushing away from the wall. Thanks for trying to warn me. Good luck, Li Wei called after her as she walked toward the employee exit. Call me if you need anything. Jessica stepped out into the late afternoon sunshine, the sounds of the city washing over her. 3 years of hard work, possibly down the drain because of one biased moment. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Raj. What happened? She ignored it, too drained to explain. As she waited for the bus that would take her home, Jessica replayed the scene in the restaurant over and over in her mind. The Marshalls' faces, Thomas's disappointment, the realization that she had judged the family by standards she hadn't applied to others. The bus arrived and Jessica climbed aboard, finding a seat near the back. As the city rolled by outside the window, she made a decision. If she still had a job tomorrow, things would be different. And if she didn't, well, she would make sure she learned from this mistake, wherever she ended up next. What she didn't know was that her phone was about to ring, with a call that would change everything. A call from Meridian Hospitality, Group's corporate office. Jessica's apartment was small but cozy, with mismatched furniture collected over years of thrift store hunting and the occasional sidewalk find. Usually she loved coming home to this space, her own little corner of the world. Today it felt like a cage. She tossed her keys onto the kitchen counter and collapsed onto her worn sofa, staring blankly at the ceiling. The bus ride home had been a blur, her mind replaying the afternoon's events on an endless loop. Her phone buzzed again, the 5th time since she'd left Sapphire. 4 texts from Raj and 1 from Leeway. She ignored them all, too drained to explain what had happened. How could she put into words the sickening realization that had been growing since her conversation with Thomas? Jessica had always prided herself on being fair and professional. She'd grown up in a diverse neighborhood, had friends from different backgrounds, considered herself open-minded. And yet today, faced with a black family in an upscale restaurant, she'd applied different standards without even realizing it. The thought made her stomach turn. She wasn't that person. She couldn't be. Her phone rang, cutting through her thoughts. An unknown number with the city's area code. Jessica almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. Hello? Her voice sounded small, even to her own ears. Is this Jessica Chen? The voice on the other end was crisp, professional. Yes, this is she. My name is Victoria Wells, executive assistant to Diana Marshall at Meridian Hospitality Group. Mrs. Marshall would like to meet with you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at our downtown office. Can you confirm your availability? Jessica sat up straight, her heart hammering in her chest. Yes, I'm available. What else could she say? This wasn't a request she could refuse. Excellent. Our office is located in the Meridian Tower, 47th floor. Please bring your ID for security. Do you need the address? No, I know where it is. Everyone in Chicago knew the gleaming Meridian Tower, one of the newest additions to the city's skyline. Very good, Mrs. Marshall appreciates punctuality. The call ended before Jessica could ask any questions. She sat frozen, phone still clutched in her hand. Diana Marshall wanted to meet with her. Not some HR representative, not a middle manager, but the COO herself. This couldn't be good. Her phone buzzed with another text, this time from Thomas. Heard from Robert. Meeting tomorrow at Meridian. They want me there at 10. You? Jessica typed back. 9 a.m., just got the call. 3 dots appeared as Thomas typed his response. Earlier than me. Not sure what that means. Good luck. Jessica tossed her phone aside and pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. Was she being fired? Of course she was. Why else would the COO of a major hospitality group want to see her? They wouldn't waste Diana Marshall's valuable time just to give Jessica a slap on the wrist. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Jessica tossed and turned, imagining all the different ways tomorrow's meeting could go. In every scenario, she ended up unemployed, her reputation in Chicago's restaurant scene ruined. By morning, she was exhausted but strangely calm. The worst was going to happen whether she worried about it or not. All she could do now was face it with as much dignity as possible. She dressed carefully in her best interview outfit, a navy blue pantsuit she'd bought on sale for her Sapphire interview 3 years ago. It was slightly outdated, but it was the most professional thing she owned. She pulled her hair back into a neat bun and applied minimal makeup, aiming for a look that said responsible and remorseful without seeming like she was trying too hard. The Meridian Tower loomed over the surrounding buildings, its glass exterior reflecting the morning sun. Jessica felt small as she approached, just one person among the streams of well-dressed professionals flowing through the revolving doors. The security desk in the lobby was staffed by 2 guards in crisp uniforms. Jessica gave her name, showed her ID, and received a visitor's badge in return. The guard directed her to a specific elevator bank for the upper floors. 47th floor, he said. Executive level. The elevator was sleek and silent, rising so smoothly that Jessica barely felt the movement. Only the changing numbers on the digital display indicated their rapid ascent. She wasn't alone in the elevator, but the other occupants, men and women in expensive suits with confident expressions, made her feel invisible. Or maybe that was just her anxiety. People got off at various floors until Jessica was alone for the final ascent to the 47th. When the doors opened, she stepped into another world. The executive floor of Meridian Hospitality Group was all polished marble and glass, with stunning views of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. The reception desk was a single piece of curved marble, behind which sat a poised woman with a headset. "Jessica Chen for Diana Marshall," Jessica said, her voice steadier than she felt. The receptionist nodded. "You're expected. Please have a seat. Ms. Wells will be with you shortly." Jessica sat in one of the sleek leather chairs in the waiting area, trying not to fidget. On the wall opposite her was a large display featuring photos of Meridian's properties around the world. Luxury hotels, resorts, restaurants. Sapphire was there among dozens of other upscale establishments. "Ms. Chen?" Jessica looked up to see a tall woman with a tablet in hand. "I'm Victoria Wells, Mrs. Marshall's assistant. Please follow me." Jessica followed Victoria down a corridor lined with glass-walled offices. She caught glimpses of meetings in progress, executives on calls, all the inner workings of a major corporation. At the end of the hall was a corner office with stunning views of the lake. Victoria knocked once on the open door. "Mrs. Marshall? Jessica Chen is here." Diana Marshall looked up from her computer screen. In the restaurant, Jessica had registered her as well-dressed but unremarkable. Here in her element, Diana Marshall was transformed. She radiated authority, from her perfectly tailored suit to her confident posture. "Thank you, Victoria. Please come in, Ms. Chen." Jessica entered the office, unsure whether to extend her hand or wait to be invited to sit. Diana solved the dilemma by gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "Please, sit down. Can I offer you coffee? Water?" "No, thank you," Jessica managed, lowering herself into the chair. It was more comfortable than it looked, which somehow made the situation worse. Why make her comfortable if they were just going to fire her? Diana studied her for a moment, her expression unreadable. "I imagine you know why you're here." Jessica nodded. "Yes, ma'am. About yesterday at Sapphire. I want to apologize for—" Diana held up a hand, stopping her. "Before we get to that, I'd like to tell you something about Meridian. Do you know much about our company?" "Not as much as I should," Jessica admitted. "I know you acquired Sapphire 6 months ago." "Yes, along with several other properties. Meridian began as a single hotel in Detroit 20 years ago. My husband and I built it from nothing." Diana's voice held pride but not arrogance. "We now own over 100 properties worldwide, employing more than 10,000 people." Jessica nodded, unsure where this was going. "Throughout our growth," Diana continued, "we've maintained a core philosophy. The guest experience is everything. Not just the food or the room or the amenities, but how people feel when they're with us. Do they feel welcomed, valued, respected?" The knot in Jessica's stomach tightened. This was it, the setup before the axe fell. "Yesterday at Sapphire, my family did not feel welcomed, valued, or respected," Diana said, her voice matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. "We felt judged and dismissed." "I'm truly sorry," Jessica said, the words catching in her throat. "I made assumptions I shouldn't have made. I applied standards unequally. It was wrong, and I have no excuse." Diana leaned back in her chair, studying Jessica with renewed interest. "Your manager said you'd probably deny it was about race." Jessica felt heat rise to her face. He was right at first. On the bus ride home, I kept telling myself it wasn't about that. But by the time I got to my apartment, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. She met Diana's gaze directly. "I treated your family differently because you're black. I didn't do it consciously, but that doesn't matter. It still happened, and it was still wrong." For the first time, Diana's expression softened slightly. Unconscious bias is still bias, but recognizing it is the first step to addressing it. She paused. "Do you know why we visit our properties unannounced, dressed casually?" Jessica shook her head. "Because we want to experience them the way regular people do, not as VIPs, not as owners, but as everyday guests." Diana's eyes held Jessica's. "What we experienced yesterday happens to people who look like us all the time. The difference is, we have the power to do something about it." Jessica swallowed hard. "I understand, and I accept whatever consequences you feel are appropriate." "I'm glad to hear that," Diana said, "because the consequences may not be what you're expecting." Before Jessica could ask what that meant, there was another knock at the door. Victoria Wells appeared again. Mr. Marshall and Mr. Chen have arrived. Send them in, Diana said. Jessica turned to see James Marshall enter the office, followed by an older Asian man she didn't recognize. They both nodded to Diana before taking seats beside Jessica, forming a semicircle before Diana's desk. Jessica, Diana said. You've met my husband, James. This is Robert Chen, our vice president of operations. Robert Chen gave Jessica a small nod, but no smile. His expression was serious, evaluating. James Marshall cleared his throat. We've been discussing your situation this morning. The question before us is not whether what happened was wrong. We all agree it was, but what happens next? Jessica steeled herself for the inevitable. Meridian has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind, Robert Chen said, his voice firm. However, we also believe in education and growth over mere punishment. Diana nodded. We had a long conversation as a family last night, including our children. We discussed firing you, of course. Jessica's heart sank. But then our daughter Zoe asked an interesting question. Diana continued. She asked, what good would that do? And she was right. Firing you might satisfy our anger in the moment, but it wouldn't change anything systemically. James leaned forward. Which is why we're not going to fire you, Ms. Chen. Instead, we're going to give you a choice. Jessica stared at James Marshall, certain she had misheard him. A choice? James nodded. Instead of termination, we're offering you a different path forward. Diana slid a folder across her desk. We've been working on a company-wide initiative to address unconscious bias in customer service. It's something the hospitality industry struggles with, not just our restaurants. Jessica opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a detailed proposal for a training program focused on equitable customer service and recognizing unconscious bias. She looked up, confused. I don't understand. We want you to help develop this program, Robert Chen explained, his tone businesslike but not unkind. Your experience yesterday, on both sides of the equation, gives you a unique perspective. Jessica blinked rapidly, trying to process what she was hearing. You want me to work on this? After what I did? Precisely because of what you did, Diana said. And more importantly, because of how you've responded to it. You didn't make excuses. You looked inward and acknowledged the truth, however uncomfortable. But I'm not qualified, Jessica protested. I'm just a server. I don't know anything about corporate training programs. You have a degree in communications that you've never used because the money in restaurants was too good to pass up. James said. Jessica's eyes widened. How did you? We did our homework, Robert said simply. Your resume is in our HR files. 3 years at Sapphire, 4 years of college before that, graduating with honors. You're more qualified than you think. Diana leaned forward. Here's our proposition. A 6-month position as a consultant on our Equitable Service Initiative. You'll work with our training team to develop materials based on real-world experiences, including your own. If the program is successful, there could be a permanent position afterward. Jessica's mind raced. This wasn't at all what she had expected. What about Sapphire? My job there? That's part of the choice, James said. You can return to Sapphire if you prefer. Thomas speaks highly of your work ethic and everyone makes mistakes. But we think you might be capable of something more impactful. The salary would be significantly higher than what you make as a server, even including tips, Robert added, sliding another document toward her. And it comes with full benefits. Jessica glanced at the number on the page and nearly gasped. It was more than double what she made at Sapphire in a good year. I don't know what to say, she admitted. You don't have to decide right now, Diana assured her. Take the weekend to think about it, but we'd need your answer by Monday morning. Jessica nodded, still stunned. Can I ask why? Why give me this opportunity when you could just fire me and be done with it? Diana and James exchanged a glance, some unspoken communication passing between them. Because 20 years ago, we were on the other side of that interaction more times than we can count, James said quietly. Back when we were just starting out, before Meridian became what it is today. We'd go to meetings with potential investors, Diana continued, dressed in our best clothes with our business plan polished to perfection. And we'd be mistaken for the help, or asked if we were in the right place, or told the meeting was by appointment only, despite having an appointment. We built this company by turning obstacles into opportunities, James said. We're offering you the chance to do the same. The office fell silent. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Jessica could see the city spread out below. People and cars moving like toys from this height. Yesterday, she had been down there, one small person in the flow. Today, she was being offered a view from above, a chance to see the bigger picture and perhaps to change it. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "And thank you, not just for the opportunity, but for making me face what I did. I needed that." Diana nodded, a hint of approval in her eyes. "We'll expect your answer on Monday." Robert stood, signaling that the meeting was over. "I'll walk you out." As Jessica followed him to the door, James called after her. "One more thing, Ms. Chen." She turned back. "Whatever you decide, remember that moments like yesterday, moments of realization and accountability, they're painful, but they're also precious. They're how we grow." Outside the Meridian Tower, Jessica stood on the sidewalk, dazed. The morning sun was higher now, the streets busy with the rhythm of a workday she was somehow no longer part of. She had entered that building expecting to be fired. Instead, she'd been offered a lifeline. Not just another job, but a chance to transform a humiliating mistake into something meaningful. Her phone buzzed. A text from Li Wei, still alive. "What happened?" Jessica smiled faintly and typed back, "Still alive." Too complicated for text. "Coffee later?" His response came immediately. "Corner cafe at 2? See you there," she replied. She had hours before meeting Li Wei. Hours to walk the city and think about the choice before her. The sensible option was obvious. Take the consulting job with its impressive salary and potential for growth. Who would turn that down to return to serving tables? And yet, there was comfort in the familiar. She knew Sapphire. She knew how to be a good server. This new role would push her into unknown territory, force her to revisit yesterday's humiliation again and again as she built a program around it. Did she have the courage for that? Jessica found herself wandering toward the lake, drawn to the open horizon of water. She sat on a bench along the shore, watching the play of sunlight on the waves. The corporate job was the practical choice, the safe choice. But something James Marshall had said kept echoing in her mind. Moments of realization and accountability. They're painful, but they're also precious. They're how we grow. When she met Li Wei at the corner cafe, he was already waiting at an outdoor table, 2 coffees in front of him. "I ordered your usual," he said as she sat down. "Now spill. What happened at Meridian? Are you fired? Do we need to start sending out your resume?" Jessica took a sip of her coffee, prepared exactly how she liked it, and told him everything. The meeting with Diana Marshall, the unexpected offer, the choice she had to make by Monday. When she finished, Li Wei whistled low. "That's not what I expected." "Me neither," Jessica admitted. "What would you do?" Li Wei considered for a moment. "Honestly, I'd take the corporate job in a heartbeat. More money, better hours, chance for advancement. No brainer, but..." Jessica could hear the hesitation in his voice. "But I'm not you," he said simply. "You've always talked about going to grad school using your degree. Maybe this is your chance." "It's also a chance to spend months reliving the worst moment of my professional life," Jessica pointed out. "Talking about my mistake over and over," Li Wei shrugged. "Or reframing it as the moment that launched your career. Depends how you look at it." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching people pass by on the sidewalk. A family walked past. Parents and 2 teenagers laughing about something. Jessica felt a pang as they reminded her of the Marshalls. "You know what's strange?" she said. "I keep thinking about their daughter, Zoe. Diana said it was her question that made them consider an alternative to firing me." "What good would that do?" "That's what she asked." "Smart kid," Li Wei remarked. "Yeah." Jessica traced the rim of her coffee cup. "I keep wondering what she sees when she looks at someone like me. Does she see the person who asked her family to leave? Or does she see someone who could change? Maybe that's your answer right there," Li Wei said gently. Jessica nodded, feeling something settle inside her. Maybe it is. The weekend passed in a blur of pros and cons lists, conversations with friends, and long walks along the lake. By Sunday night, Jessica had made her decision. Monday morning found her back at the Meridian Tower, riding the elevator to the 47th floor. Victoria Wells was waiting at reception. "Mrs. Marshall is expecting you," she said, leading Jessica down the now familiar hallway. Diana looked up from her desk as Jessica entered. "Have you made your decision, Ms. Chen?" Jessica took a deep breath. I have. I want to take the position with the Equitable Service Initiative. A small smile curved Diana's lips. Excellent. Robert will be pleased. He bet James $20 that you'd accept. Jessica raised an eyebrow. And what did Mr. Marshall think? James thought you might need more time, Diana admitted. He thought the weight of it all might be too much right away. It is a lot, Jessica acknowledged. But I've realized something. If I go back to Sapphire, I'll always be the server who got caught showing bias. If I take this position, I can be the person who helped change the system that allowed it to happen. Diana nodded approvingly. That's precisely the perspective we were hoping for. She pressed a button on her desk phone. Victoria, please let Robert know Ms. Chen has accepted the position. And have HR send up the paperwork. As Victoria acknowledged the request, Diana stood and extended her hand across the desk. Welcome to Meridian, Jessica. Your first day with the training team is tomorrow, 9 a.m. sharp. Jessica shook her hand, feeling a strange mix of nervousness and determination. I'll be here. What Jessica couldn't know, as she signed her new employment contract, was just how far this path would take her. She couldn't foresee the resistance she would face from managers who saw the training as unnecessary, or the skepticism from former colleagues who thought she'd sold out. She had no way of knowing that 6 months would turn into a year, and then 2, as the program expanded beyond Meridian to other companies in the industry. And she certainly couldn't imagine that one day she would stand in front of a room of restaurant managers, including Thomas from Sapphire, as the director of Equitable Service Training, telling her story not with shame but with purpose. All of that lay ahead. For now, there was just a choice made, a hand shaken, and the first step onto a new path. 1 year later, Jessica stood in the back of the training room watching as the participants filed in. Restaurant managers, hosts, and servers from across Meridian's Chicago properties took their seats, some chatting easily, others checking phones or reviewing the training materials placed at each spot. This was the 20th session of the Equitable Service Initiative that Jessica had led, but the nervous flutter in her stomach hadn't diminished. Each group brought new challenges, new resistances to overcome, and new opportunities to make a difference. All set? Robert Chen appeared at her side, clipboard in hand. Jessica nodded. Just doing my pre-training ritual. Still getting nervous after all this time? Robert smiled. In the past year, their relationship had evolved from strictly professional to something approaching friendship. As her direct supervisor, Robert had pushed Jessica harder than anyone, challenging her ideas and forcing her to defend every element of the training program. But he'd also become her biggest advocate within the company. I think the day I stop getting nervous is the day I should quit, Jessica replied. It means I've stopped caring. Robert checked his watch. The Marshalls are running late. Diana said to start without them. Jessica felt a twinge of disappointment but nodded. James and Diana made a point of attending at least part of each training session when their schedule allowed. Their presence sent a powerful message about the company's commitment to the program. As the clock hit 9 Shanghai, Jessica moved to the front of the room. The chatter died down as participants noticed her, their expressions ranging from interest to barely concealed skepticism. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jessica Chen, Director of Equitable Service Training at Meridian. Even after 6 months with the new title, the words still felt strange in her mouth. Before we begin, I want to thank you all for being here today. I know training sessions aren't always at the top of your want-to-do list. A few chuckles rippled through the room. Jessica smiled, feeling herself relax into the familiar rhythm of the introduction. We're going to spend the day talking about unconscious bias in customer service. But before we dive into concepts and strategies, I want to tell you a story. My story. The room grew quieter. This was always the hardest part, laying herself bare, sharing her mistake and its consequences. But it was also the most effective. Nothing broke down defenses like vulnerability. A little over a year ago, I was a server at Sapphire. She noticed a few recognizing nods. Sapphire had a reputation in Chicago's restaurant scene. I thought I was good at my job. I prided myself on maintaining the restaurant standards and providing excellent service. And then one day, a family came in. Jessica told the story without embellishment, neither downplaying her actions nor being unnecessarily harsh on her past self. She described the Marshall family without initially revealing who they were, explained her different treatment of them compared to other guests, and recounted their quiet departure from the restaurant. It wasn't until they left that I learned the truth, she continued. The family I had asked to leave, the family I had applied different standards to because of unconscious bias, owned the restaurant. And not just Sapphire, but the entire Meridian restaurant division. She paused, letting that sink in. Some of the participants shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others maintained carefully neutral expressions. I expected to be fired, Jessica said. I deserved to be fired. Instead, the marshals offered me something I never expected, a chance to learn from my mistake and help others do the same. The door at the back of the room opened, and Jessica looked up to see Diana and James Marshall slip quietly inside. Diana gave her a small nod to continue. That's how this program was born, Jessica explained. Not from some corporate mandate or PR strategy, but from a family who chose education over punishment, growth over shame. For the next several hours, Jessica led the group through exercises designed to reveal their own unconscious biases, facilitated discussions about real-world scenarios, and provided practical strategies for more equitable service. There were difficult moments, there always were. One restaurant manager insisted that treating all customers exactly the same was the solution, missing the point about equity versus equality. A server from one of the downtown hotels argued that certain demographics simply tipped less, so giving them less attention was just good business. Jessica handled each objection the way she always did, with patience, personal examples, and data. By the lunch break, even the most resistant participants were engaging more openly. As the group dispersed for lunch, Diana approached the front of the room. You get better every time, she said warmly. Thanks, Jessica replied, though I still haven't figured out how to handle the it's just business argument without wanting to scream. Diana laughed. Some mindsets take longer to change than others. But they do change. The survey data proves it. The program's effectiveness was indeed backed by numbers. Customer satisfaction scores across Meridian properties had increased by an average of 17% since the training began, with particularly notable improvements among diverse customer demographics. Speaking of change, Diana said, James and I wanted to talk to you about the next phase of the initiative. Jessica raised an eyebrow. Next phase? We've had interest from outside Meridian, James explained, joining them. Other hospitality groups have noticed our improved ratings and want to know our secret. It's hardly a secret, Jessica pointed out. Treating all customers with equal respect and dignity shouldn't be revolutionary, and yet it is, Diana said with a wry smile. We're considering offering the training as a separate service to other companies, and we'd want you to head it up. Jessica blinked in surprise. Me? But I've only been doing this for a year. A very successful year, James countered. The program is your creation, Jessica. You understand it better than anyone. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. Expanding beyond Meridian would mean building a team, adapting the training for different corporate cultures, and putting herself out there in an even bigger way. I'd need to think about it, Jessica said finally. Of course, Diana agreed. But before you do, there's something else we'd like you to consider. A sort of full circle moment, if you will. Later that evening, Jessica pushed open the familiar doors of Sapphire. The restaurant looked exactly as she remembered it, elegant, polished, humming with the energy of a busy dinner service. But Jessica herself was different, from her tailored business suit to the confidence in her stride. Leeway spotted her from the host stand and broke into a wide grin. Look what the cat dragged in. He came around the desk to give her a quick hug. The big corporate executive returns to her humble beginnings, Jessica laughed. Hardly an executive. Just doing my small part to make the industry better. Small part? That's not what I hear. Leeway led her through the dining room. Thomas says your training program is being talked about by every restaurant group in the city. Jessica felt a flush of pride but shrugged it off. We've had some good results. They reached a private dining room at the back of the restaurant. Inside, Thomas was arranging the last of about 20 place settings at a long table. He looked up as they entered. Jessica! Right on time. He came over to greet her with a handshake that turned into a brief hug. Everyone's excited to meet you. Are you sure this is a good idea? Jessica asked, suddenly nervous. Thomas nodded firmly. The staff has heard me talk about your program for months. Having you lead the training here where it all started, it's powerful. That was Diana's suggestion. that Jessica conduct the first external training session at Sapphire itself. Closing the loop, she'd called it. The door opened again and servers and kitchen staff began filing in for their pre-shift meeting, which would today include the first hour of Jessica's training. Some faces she recognized, others were new, but all looked at her with curiosity. As Jessica prepared her materials, she caught sight of a family being seated in the main dining room, parents and two teenagers laughing together. For a split second, her mind flashed back to that fateful day a year ago. Then she smiled to herself, recognizing how far she'd come. "Ready?" Thomas asked. Jessica nodded. "Ready." As she turned to face the staff of the restaurant where her journey had begun, Jessica felt a sense of completion. The mistake that could have ended her career had instead transformed it. The biases she hadn't known she carried were now the very things she helped others recognize in themselves. And somewhere in the city, a family who could have responded with anger had chosen kindness instead, changing not just one waitress's life, but potentially thousands of customer experiences across the industry. "Good evening, everyone," Jessica began. "My name is Jessica Chen, and I'm here to tell you a story about a mistake that turned into an opportunity, and how the same can happen for you."